26th, and it's snowing outside where I live. It's coming down in quite heavily, but in little tiny flakes. So it's gonna get some inches, and it's been snowing for a couple of days. So I know people are pretty excited. And my road, which is normally very busy, still hasn't had any cars make tracks on it. So it seems like the whole world is quiet. And today's Be Devotional, I wanted to dedicate to a sort of a solstice vibe. Just taking a moment to allow what has happened in the last year to come to its end and make ready for the new year as the light returns to the earth. And of course, this isn't a unique idea. This is, cultures everywhere that have seasons are very tender at this time in the Northern Hemisphere because our light goes and there's not a lot growing and the animals are hard to find. And so in the ancient times, this is a very concerning time. And so I just wanted to dedicate a few minutes to thinking about that, as this experience is also in our DNA. So it came to me that when I was traveling in Scotland, there are these mounds that have these shafts with these heavy, like 2-ton granite doors that when they were made, you could just push them open and closed. A 10-year-old could just push them open and closed because of the way they had them levered or something in it. And you could lock them, and pretty amazing technology. And there was all this question about what these buildings are. And Rebecca and I and others, my friends that were with, we were in it. And there was this long description of how the light comes in and hits the back of this certain chamber, and these certain chambers are shaped just so that the light can hit it at this certain time of year. And everybody's talking about it being a burial chamber and whatnot, but they were also talking about being a granary. And in a sense, I don't see why it has to be an either or. Why isn't it both? If the burial is of the grain god, if the seed is going into the womb and then the spark of life rebirths it, many people that are in this sort of temperate calendar will see that there's a magical time. It gets darker and darker and darker and darker. And then all of a sudden, at some point, light begins to return incrementally. And there's that magical moment when, is it going to keep going and make it all night, all the time? Or is it going to come back? And that is faith right there. That's faith in knowing the sun will return, trusting there's no game about it. The seasons change, and even after darkness, the sun always returns. That is absolutely worthy of faith. There are no words, in any holy books, maybe about it in particular, but yet that is the archetypal truth of our DNA. Since the time we've been living near or on the water or in the caves or on the plains, anytime that we are dependent on seasonal changes for foods and migrations and fruitings, then we will develop these sorts of archetypal understandings. And that of faith of the solar god is a central understanding to the pagan DNA. So that is perhaps a core of many of these spiritual traditions that have to do with the returning of the sun and the returning of the sun and the aspect of rebirth. And I think as people are beginning to understand animal husbandry and the magic of conception and the understanding of specific DNA is simple through observation. People everywhere are going to understand that this seed and this timing had to create this creature and this person and this animal and this plant. So anybody that's in touch with their nature will, their natural environment will be able to observe these things. So I don't believe that the idea of seeding masculine, feminine is foreign, or, you know, was a naive understanding to think that everything was created out of nature herself, until you go back, and, you know, back to the origin. So we learned that the sun is always, always there. And even though we understand that the seed makes some sort of life force happen, it is always this divine feminine energy back to the earth that we see, the divine feminine. So this root knowledge, this universal archetypal mother, is also a kind of faith. And we can recognize that in gravity, because gravity is the way that the earth is pulling us toward her at all times and springing up from her to come into life, and then pulling down toward her to be re-embraced and reincarnated. And we can talk about reincarnation in a few ways. I'm not, you know, I'm not really that versed on afterlife, or, you know, I'm not, I was, although I was raised Catholic to some extent, I was always a seeker and always tried to find some truth in God. I would go to church. I would, even as a young kid, finding a little Baptist church with Sunday school, I would want to go to that and learn about God and those kinds of things. And I remember when I was maybe early high school, going to a local church and envisioning my head as a bowl and the word of God filling my head. And I did achieve a kind of peace. I had this quiet moment of my head just filling with light, but it was also not speaking to me. And then sometime later, around that time, I was skipping school and went out to one of my favorite hiking spots in the Columbia River Gorge, and saw nature unfold beneath me as I climbed this trail, and said to myself, well, whatever the Native Americans are saying, that's my truth, that God is in nature and that it is something other than a patriarchal, judgmental Christian God. It is something more loving and sustaining and nurturing. And that's where my roots returned to her, this concept of where my faith lies, in that the earth loves us, nature loves us. Nature is aware of us. You're never alone. I'm never alone. Even the wild animals in my neighborhood know me, and they know you. Your neighbors know you pretty well, probably. So one of the key things that happens in cultures everywhere is this idea of rebirth at this time. And we see that in the Christian holiday of Christmas, where God is reborn and Jesus is reborn. He's born this day, right? This is when he's first born. And then at Easter, he is reborn after the crucifixion or whatever. It was a long time ago since my catechism. I don't really care for the story, because I don't think anybody would kill their child. But what I do really trust is this story about the son leaving, but always returning. And I do trust the idea is that the mother gives us of her own body somehow restoratively, year after year for millennium, as long as anyone can ever remember. The earth gives to us. We never even have to question it. She is just always there for us. It is only in the places where she is disturbed and violated that ceases to happen. And but we do have this ancestral deep knowing of this parthenogenic knowledge of. One of the things I think is just really beautiful is the concept of restoration, and that is available to all of us. And this is a great time to contemplate it. And one of the ways that people have always celebrated this time in the northern hemisphere, where I am and where most of my ancestors come from, is to have a fire. And having been survived an actual fire in the Alameda fire here, I have a special relationship now with fire, understanding how it is when it's out of balance, and how directly humans can be affected by that out of balance. And of course, it goes without saying that much of that out of balance is created by humans. So that is, part of that story. But in the ancient times, to have a fire at this time of year is a great idea. People could get together and burn the Yule Log. And the Yule Log was a maypole that had been created in spring with the community. So the community, and I'm talking, European, Germanic is part of my heritage, would get the log, and they would put a wreath and tie ribbons to the wreath, and they would all do this dance to music and make this beautiful weave that would basket weave around the maypole, and it would just magically form this wonderful net around the maypole. And sometimes they would, for those people that live far away, they would cut it up, and those people would take it home and soak it in, they say soak it in some kind of liquor like whiskey, brandy or something, and then burn it at this time of year in celebration of the return of the light. So taking that wonderful symbol of the gathering and the fertility and the spring of the planet, and coming forward and bringing it back again as a celebration at this time of year, the darkest time of year, to remind us of that faith, to remind us of the time when we could all join together, and the world was becoming festooned with blossoms as we were festooning the maypole and wrapping the maypole with ribbons, and every ribbon was a friend, and every time around the circle was a flirt and an eye contact and a giggle and a wiggle, and it's a really fun memory. So you would be burning this at this time of year to enjoy the fragrance of the mead, perhaps, that you soak that in, and the memory of all of us dancing around the maypole. So it's a faith in a faith in two directions: a faith in what happened and a memory, what we belong to, and a faith in where we're going. And that's what I really love about it. And so there's a time right now also when we are, a lot of people are really struggling. This is a time where people sometimes feel lonely. They have an idea, maybe an ancient memory, that this is a time when we're supposed to be super close and working together, maybe weaving blankets, or making yarn, or preparing meats, or doing different things that you might do in the wintertime, making sure that the wood and everything was ready to burn for your long fires, taking advantage of clear days, telling stories to each other, maybe even stories over and over and over again from the grandmothers that remind us of our stories, of who we are as a people. So in this time when a lot of us have family all over the place, it's more challenging. And now, of course, with what's going on in the world, it's more challenging to get together. So a lot of people are feeling kind of lonely. And so that led me to think about times in our history when things have been really, really difficult. And there was a poet named Rudyard Kipling, who was born in India, but he's an English writer. He wrote The Jungle Book and The Man Who Would Be King and Rikki-Tikki-Tavi. And he wrote a poem about, it's called Rebirth. And he was alive during World War I, which was extremely brutal in Europe. And there was a lot of man-on-man, hand-to-hand combat and close-up combat and invasions of countries, neighboring countries. So it was a great deal of suffering. And he wrote a poem, and the first part of it's very, very dark. And I invite you to look it up. It's called Rebirth. But I didn't want to subject you to the whole thing because it was, it's an intense poem. But what he says, and he wrote between 1914 and 1918, he wrote, "If any God should say, I will restore the world her yesterday, whole as before my judgment blasted it, who would not lift heart, eye, and hand in passion over the gift? If any God should will to wipe from mind the memory of this ill, which is mankind, in soul and substance now, who would not bless, even to tears, his loving tenderness?" And I think that is in a way the idea of the rebirth that we can have at this time of year. Of course, what he's talking about is a great suffering, and many of us have experienced some suffering this year, loss of jobs. Two of my brothers have been hospitalized and gotten very sick during this time. There's been a lot of struggles at this time. And wouldn't it be cool if we could just just go back to some kind of place that, used to be, or what if we could just go forward and just shake it off and just be rebirth? But that's not necessarily what is required at this time. And when first we have one more important step, and that is the burning off. And this burning of the Yule Log may be a place, or, the Christmas bonfire may be a place where we can do that, where the people could come together in the wintertime and maybe share resources. I did read an article from National Geographic that said that the Yule Log may be a tradition of where somebody would make a fire out of one tree, and they would have a tree in a clearing, and they would light that big fire, and all the community would come forward and have a celebration or a sharing of resources around that fire. And that was a way for people to stay warm, visit. That fire would burn for a long time, and would light up everything around it, and would be a really wonderful way to celebrate in the wintertime. And that the Christmas tree comes from that, where they would tie food and presents to the tree, and you can go around and get an apple, get a gingerbread man. And then the tradition later becomes putting the candles on the tree, so that it would remind us of these great big community fires, where we would have one big tree on fire, so we could all be around it and hang out and have a good time. So, and I think maybe at some point in that ritual, I would guess that there would be time to speak of what's gone on this year, who passed away, who had a baby, who got married, what was happening in the community. Was anybody sick? Did anybody need anything in the community? Of course, that's what happens at all community gatherings when community are invested in each other. So I came upon a a piece by someone named Kristen Rogers. And I think that to take a moment and consider what is burning away, what is ending this year, what is no longer going to be, is a great way to be reborn, to let go of things that are no longer serving, to honor endings, and just spend the moment and allow ourselves to recognize that as we watch the light come back more and more and more. So it's a great time in the darkest time of year to release the darkness so that it can be refilled again as the light returns. So Kristen Rogers wrote, "Sometimes what's dead must be burned away to make room for new life. Sometimes you just have to step back and let the brittle bits ignite. But once those flames begin to dance their caustic dance, don't you dare look the other way. Don't close your eyes. Watch closely and let that image sear itself forever on your mind. Remember what it looked like in the midst of the soot, the smoke, and the haze. Remember so you don't repeat the same conditions that required such a blaze." And that's very relevant to me as we, pass the 1-year anniversary this year of our Alameda fire. And then I came across another poem that was written in 2018 by Melora Johnson. And the reason why I picked this poem is because I also want to just spend a moment to acknowledge those of us that may be having maybe a little loneliness or isolation, that this poem sort of brings that to light, brings something to light about that. For myself, I'm neither a Christian nor am I into things much, and nor is my immediate family. So we just enjoy the quiet of this day and usually eat a good meal. And it just becomes a very quieting day for me. It becomes a time of contemplation and of solitude, almost intentional solitude. And this poem speaks to me about my own holiday process. Winter solstice fires. The landscape bleak. Trees are tired, asleep. Dark limbs branch, bare and bony, asphalt lays, gray and wet. Pull the drapes against frigid air seeping in at window pane and door. Light a fire in the wood stove or in a fireplace of any sort. Build a bonfire out in the cold. Light a candle to hold back the dark. Sip something with heat to light a fire from within. Whether we do or don't, believe it will or won't, the light will return. Wrap up, keep the faith, hold on to one another. It's only a matter of time if we can wait. See there in the morning with the dawn, it has already begun. And last, as we do awaken in the morning and see the light returns again, a little more and a little more and a little more, we do become new. Every day our cells are becoming reborn, and every 7 years, your entire cellular body is reborn. Every cell in your body has been completely changed every 7 years. And in 1 year, a great deal of us is also transformed. And so as we consider what are we becoming, I would like to read one more piece, which did not have an author attached to where I found this, but it's called Reincarnation. I dream of being reborn as the Queen of Pentacles, surrounded by flowers and plush green. She wears her garden shawl, thick with velvet, scent of rain earth, feet root planted into dirt. No wind or rain or hurricane can knock her down. She grows and grows and grows towards sun and blue-rimmed cloud. So I will close this today with a meditation and then a song from Miranda Rondeau.
opening invocation, welcoming song. Sando venarevon, satire malevato, yareme sadue kore amareva.
And I'd like to say thank you for spending time to be devotional with us.